Hello everybody and welcome to how to create a cardboard protest sign inspired by the wonderful artist Locke. Now what we're going to need today is a ruler, a pencil and a craft knife and potentially a rubber as well, and you'll see that later on. Now the first thing we need to do is go over health and safety. Please make sure you're holding the craft knife carefully, so you put it in the palm of your hand first of all if you're right-handed, and your forefinger on the top. If you're left-handed, again in the palm of your hand, forefinger on the top and then thumb to hold it into place. Now there is a safety clasp attached, and when you press that you can actually move the blade up. Please only make sure that there's one line out of the blade, and think carefully about the sharpest part of the blade, which is along the bottom edge. Make sure your hand is always out the way when you are cutting, please. Now I'm just going to quickly trim off the edges here using the lines of the cutting mat to help me to create a right angle and just to neaten off those edges. Now the next step is to think really carefully about the words or the slogan that you are going to use. Now for this example, I'm going to be using Black Lives Matter. So I need 3 sections to my board. Now I'm going to be mapping those out, measuring the size of my board and dividing it into 3 in regards to width. Now in the length, I need to then think about how many letters are in my words. And my first word is black. So I've got 5 letters. So then I need to think about measuring the length of my cardboard and then dividing that into 5. Now for me at this particular example, it was 5 centimetres. Now this will help me to make sure that every letter that I create is a similar size, and it will help me to create consistency and continuity in my work. Now I'm looking at the resource sheets to guide me with the structure of my letters and the font choice, and I'm then going to be thinking about cutting out the main squares. It's quite tricky to cut around when you're using craft knife or scissors with lots of cardboard. The smaller the size, the easier it is for you to manipulate and cut it out then. So what I'm using is the sharpest part of the scissors, which is right down in the V. So notice how I really push that cardboard right into the V because that's the sharpest element. Now the tricky part are the letters that have those inside shapes that we need to cut away. Now this can be really tricky to do with scissors, so we're going to be using a craft knife. Please take care to make sure that when you're holding it down, the other spare hand is out of the way to avoid any injuries. So moving forward, I've cut out my first word and repeated the process for the word matter. Now to create a slightly different effect for the centre word, which is lives, I've then decided to map that out onto the board itself and to cut it away. So using a ruler to help me, I'm just going to begin to cut that away. At this point you will notice that it's easier to cut it with the grain of the cardboard than it is to cut against it. So here you will notice the contrast between the words that are raised to the words that are cut away, which hopefully when the composition is finished will create a really nice, interesting effect. So next step of the process is to go in with a rubber and erase all of those pencil guidelines on the board itself and around the letters. Now to add that final Locke reference, we're going to be using acrylic paint and a paintbrush to create a really neat fine outline around the letters themselves. You'll notice here that I do a twiddly motion with my hand and the brush in order to create a fine tip. This helps me to create a really fine line around the outside of the shapes. You can rest your hand down onto the flat surface in order to create and help you to create that steady line. I'm also then going to outline the areas and the letters that I've cut away in order to help create that contrast between the cardboard and the letters themselves. I'm going to continue to outline my letters to help create that contrast, and then finally at the end I will outline the board itself to help the edges pop.